Hello everyone. Welcome back to this final comprehensive session on goods and service tax filings. So now that we have completed the entire syllabus, we will see how GSTR 1 and GSTR 3B returns are filled and filed on the GST portal. We will see the entire process, that is from data preparation till the final submission of GSTR 1 and GSTR 3B returns on the GST portal. So before proceeding to the filing process, let us quickly go through the entire syllabus and have a recap of what we have learned in each of the modules. So, in module 1, we learned about the fundamentals of GST. We learned what is GST and why was it introduced. So, GST is a tax on goods and services supplied, and it was introduced to eliminate the cascading effect of multiple taxes. Then different types of GST, that is the components of GST, like CGST, that is the central goods and service tax, then SGST, state goods and service tax, then union territory goods and service tax denoted as UTGST, and finally the IGST, that is integrated goods and service tax. Then we learned about the registration, that is the threshold, and who are required to get enrolled under the GST. So for goods it is 40 lakhs, for services it is 20 lakhs, except for some special category of states, there the limit is different. Then we learned about the taxpayer types and registration process in our module 2. So in this module we learned about the different types of taxpayer, that is regular taxpayer, then composition taxpayers, then casual taxable person and non-resident taxable person. Casual taxable person are those who carry on the business occasionally. Then non-resident taxable person are those who are non-resident but carrying business in India and they are required to pay GST in Indian business. Then composition dealers, those whose turnover has not exceeded rupees 1.5 crores can opt to pay GST under the composition scheme, and under the composition scheme they have to pay certain percentage of their turnover as goods and service tax, or we also call it as composition fee. For example, 1% is the rate for manufacturers and traders of any goods other than restaurant services. Then for restaurant services the rate is 5%, that is 2.5% under the CGST head and 2.5% under the SGST head. Then for any other type of services the rate is 6%, that is 3% under each of the heads. Then also we studied that composition dealers cannot make interstate supplies. Then we learned about the documents that are required for getting enrolled under GST. Documents like basic KYC documents, PAN, Aadhaar, then email ID, phone number, then the proof of address of the business and the categories of goods or services that are intended to be supplied under the registration. Then we also learned about the step-by-step GST registration process and amendments and cancellation of GST registration. Then in module 3 we learned about the rate structure and invoicing of the GST. We learned that there are different GST rates like 0%, 5%, 12%, 18% and 28%. Then we learned about the HSN and SAC codes. What are these HSN or SAC codes? HSN stands for Harmonized System of Nomenclature, whereas SAC codes stands for Service Accounting Codes, specifically designed for services. Then we learned about the GST compliant invoices, that is what are the mandatory informations that are required to be included in the tax invoice or bill of supply under GST. Next we learned about the debit notes and credit notes and bill of supply. So debit notes are issued whenever the tax liability and the taxable value are increasing. Credit notes are issued where the tax liability or the tax or the taxable value decreases, and bill of supply is issued when the supplier is not issuing the tax invoice due to the reason that no taxes is charged in the invoice. So supplier of exempt goods or services cannot issue a tax invoice, rather they have to issue a bill of supply. Then we learned about the reverse charge mechanism. What is reverse charge mechanism? We learned that under the reverse charge mechanism, the recipient of goods or services is required to discharge the liability of GST, and the supplier is not required to pay any GST. Also, the supplier did not charge any GST in the invoice. Then we studied about the input tax credit. What is input tax credit and the conditions for availment of input tax credit? Input tax credit is the credit of taxes that the supplier of goods or services gets against the taxes that has been paid by such supplier at the time of procurement of goods or services. For example, if I am a supplier of goods and I have an output liability of GST rupees 10,000, but at the time of procurement of goods I have already paid rupees 8,000 as GST, then what I am required to pay is the difference between the output liability less the input tax credit that is appearing in my GSTR 2B. So ultimately I have to pay only rupees 2,000. But there are certain conditions. Only if such conditions are fulfilled, then only I can utilize the input tax credit or pay such net amount. Then in our fourth module, we learned about the filing of GSTR 1 return, that is the return for outward supplies. We learned the entire portal, how the portal works and what is the structure of the GST portal. We also took a live example of data preparation for filing of GST return. Also in this module we learned about the different components of GSTR 1 return, like the B2B segment, then the B2C segment, then B2C large invoice segment, then debit notes, credit notes, HSN summary, document issued summary, and afterwards we also had an overview of what are the amendment tables in the GSTR 1 return. So we are going to cover all these in this comprehensive session of filing of GSTR 1 and GSTR 3B returns. Next, in GSTR 3B, that is in our module 5, we read about the filing of GSTR 3B return. In this module we learned about the format and structure of GSTR 3B. Then we also learned about the computation of final tax liability as per GSTR 3B return. Then we studied the input tax credit availment and offsetting the tax liability using the credit ledger and the cash ledger. Afterwards we studied about the challan generation and making of online payment. Then we learned the filing of nil GSTR 3B return, and finally we learned the validating of GSTR 3B return with GSTR 1 return and the books of accounts. Then in module 6 we learned about the other GST returns and other type of compliances. Under this module we covered the topic, that is composition scheme. What is composition scheme? Then what are the returns that a composition dealer is required to file, like CMP 08. CMP 08 is the quarterly return for disclosing the quarterly turnover and paying the GST thereon. Then GSTR 4, it is the annual return for composition dealers. They have to file the annual return before 30th June of the next financial year. Then we learned about the ITC 04, that is the job work reporting. We also learned how job work reporting is done on the GST portal by filing of ITC 04 form. ITC 04 is basically not a return, it is a form that the principal files for the movement of goods to job workers, and further from one job worker to another job worker, or the final supply of goods from the job worker either to the principal or to the third party recipient. Then we learned about the viewing and downloading of file returns from the GST portal. Also, we learned about the notices, what are the different types of notices and what are the common reasons for which SSEs receive notices. In module 7, we learned about the reconciliation and ITC matching process. So here we learned that matching of GSTR 1, GSTR 3B and GSTR 2B is impertinent. How all these three returns are interconnected and how to reconcile them with each other. Then we also learned about the reconciliation of GST returns with sales register and purchase register. Here we learned how to export the data from third-party software that we are using or the data that we have about our sales or purchases and reconcile it with the GSTR 1 and GSTR 3B return along with GSTR 2B return. Next, in module 8, we learned about the post-filing corrections and the refund process. Here we learned about the rectification of return. We learned that GSTR 1 can be amended but GSTR 3B can only be rectified. So there is a return newly introduced, that is GSTR 1A, that can be used for amending the details in the same month, but the due date is before the filing of GSTR 3B or the due date of GSTR 3B, whichever is earlier. If this return is not amended during the same month, it can be amended in the subsequent month by using the amendment tables in the GSTR 1 return of the subsequent periods. Then we learned about the refund process. What are the types of refunds, like cash refunds or refunds for exports, or under the inverted duty structure the refund can also be claimed. Then we learned about the eligibility criteria and the filing of RFD 01 form, that is for claiming the refund. So these all are the topics that we have already covered in our syllabus, and now we will consolidate the entire session and we will see how GSTR 1 return and GSTR 3B return is filed along with the preparation of data. So let us start and learn about the filing process. So before proceeding to the GSTR 1 return filing process, we will quickly see what we have learned in our second module. In our second module, we learned about the registration process, where we took a live example and filed an application for GST registration. So now that GST registration has been approved by the department and we have received the confirmation of registration. So upon the registration being approved by the department, a provisional user ID and a provisional password is received on the registered email ID and mobile number. So we have already received that provisional user ID and password. Now we will see how to log into our GST account for the first time and create a fresh username and password. Also we will see how to download the registration certificate. So we have already navigated to the GST portal. Here we have to click on login. Once we click on to this login option, there is option of username and password. So if we enter the provisional username and password here, it will be incorrect. So here we have a specific option for first time login. If you are logging in for the first time, you have to click here to log on. So here we will click. Then we will enter the provisional user ID. So let us enter the provisional user ID. This is the provisional user ID and we have to enter the password. So we will type the password. Then we have to click on login. So once we click on the login option, we have to create a new username and a new password. So we will create a new username here. So here we have the username and password. We will submit. Here username and password have been successfully created. Kindly log in using these credentials. So let us log in for the first time. This is the ID and this is the password. Then we have to enter the captcha. Here. So this is the first prompt. Upon the first time login, we have to amend the bank details, that is mandatory. If we did not amend the bank details within 30 days of the grant of registration, then our registration is liable to be suspended or cancelled by the department. So till date we do not have a bank account in the name of this firm, so we will do it at a later stage but before 30 days. Now we will download the registration certificate. So here we have user services. We have to navigate to the user services and here we have view download certificates. So we will view and download the certificate. This is the registration certificate. We will download the registration certificate. So the certificate has to be downloaded. So we have downloaded the certificate. Now let us see how does the registration certificate looks like. Here, this is the registration certificate. Here we have legal name, trade name, then constitution, then address, then date of liability, that is the date of registration, and then the jurisdiction detail. Here is the GST number and the signatory detail. So this is the registration certificate, that is REG 06. So this is how the first time login and the creation of user ID and password is done on the GST portal. So now let us log out of this and now let us proceed with the filing of GSTR 1 return.